Years ago, we were still having a class in a restaurant, just a men's early morning breakfast class. And a dear old retired pastor asked me one time, he said, "Les, why did Peter give Israel this option that they had killed their Messiah in ignorance? And why did Christ from the cross say, 'Father, forgive them'?" I think that was one of them, wasn't it? "For they know not what they do." And Stephen again in chapter 7 says basically the same thing. "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Well, now it took me a while to figure that one out, but I think I came up with the right answer. You go back into Israel's history, and according to their law of cities of refuge, if an Israeli farmer was clearing rocks off his field and he was throwing them over a hedge just to get them off his field, and without his knowing it, someone walks by on the other side and gets hit in the head by one of his rocks and it kills him. Now what could that Israeli do? He could run to a city of refuge and he could plead with those city fathers, "Hey, I didn't have any idea there was a fellow on the other side of that hedgerow. I was just throwing rocks out and I certainly didn't intend to kill him." Now if they believed him and he could convince them of that, they would send him back totally set free, because what he had done in what? Ignorance. Now, you bring that right up to the cross. Israel, had she rejected him knowing who he was, what would God have had to do with the nation? Put them to death as a nation, destroy them. But since they did it in ignorance, now what could God continue to do? Continue to deal with them in mercy and grace. Now let me show you another verse. 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. And drop down to verse 7 and 8. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. Now, of course, Paul is writing to the church at Corinth, predominantly Gentile. And as I've mentioned over and over and over and over, Paul always writes to believers. He never writes to the unbelieving world. He writes to the believer. But as he writes to the believer, of course, his message is going to go to the unbeliever, no doubt about it. All right, so now to these believers at Corinth, he writes, verse 7, chapter 2, "But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, a secret, even the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the world unto our glory." And I'm sure he's using the plural pronoun our instead of my, because God knew that this apostle would be coming on and become a writer of Scripture.